Hello Wolfpack, we're back here on Bitcoin, and today we've got a pretty interesting Bitcoin chart. We've got two scenarios on Bitcoin chart we're going to look at after we look at the daily chart and the weekly chart. Now, before I even look at those two scenarios, I'm going to tell you they're both bearish scenarios, one of which takes longer, one of which takes shorter to play out. And we'll look at that. There's pretty compelling data behind it, and it's just a rough guideline of my personal predictions. But what I'm seeing now for Bitcoin is, there's still very, very slim chance, according to what happens basically in the outer external markets, traditional markets and global events, that we could actually be seeing a pump back up to bullish momentum. And that would be at 48k to 53k, right? Haven't quite decided, specifically which one I'm looking at for like a bullish break. I think 48k at this point, just because of the fact that bull market support band's heading into that region. But between 48k and 53k, I'd start consider being bullish again. Until that point, everything in my opinion is still a downwards trend and still very strongly bearish. But looking at the daily chart and weekly chart, and then we'll get into the kind of main topic of this video. The daily chart looks interesting. All right, we've had some slight progress on Bitcoin. We reached RSI levels not seen for years, right? And we obviously saw a bit of relief because of that. Reached 20, we're already at 28. We saw a long wick to the downside on yesterday's market open. And that's because the traditional markets opened red and then they recovered quite quickly, and Bitcoin recovered as well. Because as you guys would know already, that this drop wasn't caused by the traditional markets, but it's being heavily fueled by the traditional markets. And if the traditional markets continue to drop, Bitcoin's going to drop even faster. If they go up, Bitcoin might stabilize or even have a relief rally until the next Fed talk or the next Fed meeting, which is actually tonight, and then the next one's in March. Now, we'll talk about that in a video later today. I'm going to be posting a video later today going over what's going on with the Federal Reserve and what's going on with interest rates, and a lot of people wouldn't be too interested in that. They wouldn't even know what they mean, probably. But I assure you it is very critical information, and if you're interested in crypto, you should be interested in that. And even if you're not interested in crypto, if you care about making money, you should be interested in that. Right now, Bitcoin has broken back up above the red line. It's closed the daily candle above it, and it's broken back into the wedge. Now, I would consider this wedge largely obsolete at this point. It's pretty much gone to the end, and for that reason, we're going to be deleting the wedge. But what we will be keeping and what we will be replacing with the wedge is just keeping in this yellow support line here. We'll make it a dotted line and we'll turn it down to about 2. All right, so that is still relevant in my opinion. And then we'll actually draw in a separate line here. And this may look like a wedge, right? But it's just another clear resistance line on Bitcoin that we're going to be drawing in. And that, again, it may look like a wedge, and technically it is a wedge, but those are two clear resistance lines on Bitcoin that are still prevalent. I don't think the wedge itself is still maintaining. I think those are just separate resistance lines now, but let's see what happens. It's kind of hard to tell at this point. There's been multiple fake outs, but Bitcoin's broken back above, and it's currently just on this daily candle right now. It's rejecting a little bit. Let's look at the volume on this move. Volume's been pretty good, right? That was a pretty good upward swing there. Large volume on that candle. It wasn't really a big green candle, and so the volume was kind of neutral, but even neutral volume in a downwards trend is a good sign for Bitcoin, and it's a good sign that, hey, this might be the temporary bottom. Especially considering we broke back above that red resistance line, that's a good sign. And yeah, so that's just undeniable. But will it actually equate to anything? It's a different story. And this is where it kind of leads on. Actually, let's go to the weekly chart first, and then we'll go into that chart. Kind of leads on to the question, well, what is the chances of an actual relief rally here? And just looking at the weekly chart, and this is just taking it out to an even longer term scale, because obviously when you look at these big corrections, you have to look at a long-term scale. Looking at the weekly chart and just taking away everything here, we can see that, well, Bitcoin has actually managed to drop below the Ichimoku cloud and close below it completely. Not a good sign. Dropping below that, and when you see that on a weekly chart, when you drop below an Ichimoku cloud just like that, you don't usually see breaking back above it. At most, you would see a swing back and a retest of the green Ichimoku cloud line, which is currently at around 43.5k. That's like the best case scenario for Bitcoin there. It doesn't seem like it's possible for us to break back above that cloud at this point. And then also we bring up the Gaussian channel for a second here. Let me find it. I don't think I have it on my tabs. I'll just bring up the Gaussian channel. because something as well is interesting happening with the Gaussian channel. We've dropped below the center line and this has flipped red, which is bearish. And usually when you see this happen, the last kind of area for support you can possibly get is for the bottom of the Gaussian channel, and that's at 30k right now, and that would line up with the major support block at 30k. So essentially everything, the daily chart, the weekly chart, and the traditional markets are all telling us that, hey, you know, there's a potential for Bitcoin to swing to the upside here. But the chances of it actually breaking out to the upside, very, very minimal. I think everything is a little bit oversold at this point in time. You go to the Bollinger Bands, you can see the amount of oversoldness in the market, undervaluation in the market. And, you know, a relief rally would be definitely possible at this point. But do I think will actually be considerable and take us to new places we need to go? No, not necessarily. I think we're probably looking at 40k maximum. If we see a relief rally, maybe 45.5k. That is the best case scenario. I really don't see 48k happening. But again, I could be wrong, and that's why I have the invalidation point. With every prediction someone makes, they should have an invalidation point. If we go to 48k, I'm completely wrong, but at least I have that invalidation point to recognize when I kind of drop my original prediction and just move on. Because at some point, you're going to be wrong in the market, and you need to just be able to move on like that. And that's why I have that, right? That's why I keep saying it every video. Even though I think it's not going to happen, I'm not going to, you know, rely purely on my one bearish prediction. You know, I'm wrong a considerable amount, and so why would I just act like I'm 100% going to be right this time? It doesn't make sense, right? Everyone needs a plan B, is what I'm saying. But looking at the daily chart here on Bitstamp, and this is the chart I wanted to show you guys, and these are kind of the two scenarios that I'm looking at for Bitcoin right now, okay? I'm looking at Bitcoin, and I'm thinking, and actually, let's just move this a little bit to the March area here. I can't actually remember exactly where it should be, but let me just move this a little bit to the March area, and I'll tell you why in a second. Alright, so what I'm looking at for Bitcoin is this long term, and this is why I've removed the wedge. I had the wedge there before. I removed the wedge. I have a long-term descending channel formation now. That makes more sense to me. There's less fake outs in that. It looks like a channel. It doesn't really look like a wedge. It doesn't really look like it's narrowing in too much, unless you force it to look like that. I'm seeing a wedge here. And when you see, I'm seeing a channel here, and when you see a channel, basically there's two kind of scenarios, right? Obviously, you maintain the status quo or you break out. And most of the time in a channel, on most attempts, you're going to maintain the status quo. Around 80% of attempts at the top of the channel or bottom of the channel maintain the status quo, and that means downwards trend continues. And so if you are betting for a breakout right now while we are within this channel, you are betting against what is probable. Just by pure TA, objectively, that is the objective truth. You are betting against what is probable. And in order for us to break out of this channel, okay, we need to be breaking, say, 40 to 41k, depending on when we do it. It's moving down pretty quickly, so we can't actually say exactly. 40 to 41k. If we break 40 to 41k, what I would expect is something like this orange scenario to play out, right? If we maintain the status quo, the yellow scenario is going to play out, and we could even go ahead and extend this channel a little bit more, okay? And we can add in one more kind of thing here in which we reject from 30k. Let's make this yellow, and I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this in a second. Reject from 30k, and then come down all the way to around, we'll probably see, you know, something like that actually. Let's just move that a little bit up. Reject from 30k. Something like this, right? It's hard to say exactly what would happen here, but something like this. And the reason why I've done that is because currently the 200-week SMA, which you guys would know is my major kind of bottoming out signal, is sitting at around 19.2k or 19.4k. And we would like to see us bottom out on the 200. And so the 200, by the time we get to March, will be a little bit higher, probably 21k. But we're testing 19k here, and that's going to be on a wick. So we're not talking about closes. On weekly closes, we'll probably close above the 200. But anyway, regardless, I'm getting away from the point here. The point is, there's two scenarios on Bitcoin. One of which is we maintain the status quo, and this is what I call the quick way to the bottom, and that's the yellow. We just keep bouncing around, and we just slowly deteriorate as the traditional markets crash. Everything crashes, we go down. The other scenario is that the Fed doesn't raise interest rates, and I'm going to be explaining that later today. The traditional markets recover, okay? Bitcoin bottoms out at 30k. We see a pump back up to 40k, rejection come up to possibly all the way up to 48k, right? In March is the next FMOC talk, where the Fed talk about interest rates. At that point, they will almost inevitably be forced to raise them if they don't raise them tomorrow. We will see a dump because of that, all the way back down to 30k, And from that point, we will most likely just come down to the 200. But the 200 will probably be trending upwards to around 25k at this point. And so we'd be looking at something like this as the bottom. Okay, so there's two clear scenarios, one of which, in my opinion, we bottom out in March, the other of which we bottom out in, say, May, July, June, or maybe even as late as November, as previously, suggested, but it really depends. But I really don't see, in my opinion, based off what's going on in the world, based off what's going on with Bitcoin, based off what's going on in traditional markets, any real way in which Bitcoin can see a bullish scenario. If it does, if it breaks 48k, I'm wrong. Who cares? Let's move on with our day. But at this point, I'm just seeing a long way and a quick way. And obviously, we'd love to see the quick way, right? Because that means we can just get on with our days and get this drop over with as soon as possible, possibly within even a month and a half. That would be great. The long way is just going to be drawn out. It's going to take many, many months, potentially up to 10 months, between 3 and 10 months, 4 and 10 months. But that's not what we want to see, because there's a lot of waiting around with that. But I guess there would be more trading opportunities in that kind of scenario as well. But I mean, let's see what happens. Those are two scenarios I see on Bitcoin. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and please tune in later tonight to that video I'm going to post. It's not going to be very appealing to a lot of people because they're not going to know what it's about. I promise I'll explain everything in the video, because I'm telling you right now, tonight and early March, right, are the two most important times for the traditional markets in order to avoid a recession or in order to maintain status quo, right? And there's lots of negatives and lots of positives with both of those things. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you tonight.